Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Weigel and I perform and transcribe microtonal music in a way that lots of people pretend is impossible. As a musician, I've been fascinated with Angine de Poitrine as a social phenomenon and band, henceforth referred to as ADP in this video. We're living in a strange point in ADP history as it seems the music theory YouTubers have all said their piece, but the band remains as popular as ever, with touring tickets selling out immediately and abundant memes, covers, and visuals being churned out each and every day. Even after all this time, there's actually some points about them that I don't feel anyone is saying, which is one of the main reasons this video is getting made. There's both a conspicuous lack of other essays comparing them to King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, henceforth known as King Gizz, as well as a lack of explanations about why their techniques are a unique fusion of ideas. I believe these 2 points go hand in hand, as we shall soon see. Any and all comparisons I have seen suggested on my timeline equating ADP to King Gizz are comments I've observed in written form, and not a part of the music theory video essays, many of which use my transcriptions to help explain their material. While checking out more material for research, I did see one video comparing ADP and Gizz from Gabo Rossini. The two big reasons these bands share DNA are the microtonal elements and their apparent willingness to repeat material. Specifically, people are thinking about ADP's music vis-a-vis King Gizzard's album Flying Microtonal Banana because the microtonality was explicit in the title. That means that for the scope of this video, it makes the most sense for me to compare ADP's output to Microtonal Banana only, not the rest of Gizz's work, which is too vast and covers lots of ground. Other than the aforementioned similarities, Gizz and ADP don't seem that close to me. First, let's talk about how they both iterate material, which has to do with the looping elements. You're likely aware that ADP uses elaborate, quantized looping schemes to record the double-necked guitar and bass playing, and then sends it through their system for overdubbing and various other tricks. The thing is, this system got people to mention that King Gizz used looping on Microtonal Banana, which didn't even occur to me at the time Flying Microtonal Banana was released in 2017. Maybe I was out of the loop. There's quite an art to using short structures to generate material, and it seems to me that not only does ADP have a compelling reason to do so as a challenge element, but that they also make a deliberate effort to recontextualize the same repeated riffs with a variety of rhythmic frameworks. This is often done through two methods. One, metric fakeout, i.e. layering a groove where you don't feel the true downbeat until certain definitive layers enter, and or two, varying how they subdivide within a fixed phrase length. And that is a crucial element which makes ADP's performance feel more like a gradual evolution, while Microtonal Bananas feels more stuck in a worn-out spot. It's an extremely fine line, and ADP knows how to write it. To cite some of ADP's songs, in Sarnia's, the main riff is a 2-bar phrase of 12/8, with the drums helping it feel that way, and then at a certain point, the same melodic material is played, but the drum pattern changes so that it feels like a 3-bar phrase in 4/4, or 2 bars of 6/4, depending on how you like it. Both phrase lengths have 24/8 notes, of course. In Matazyklek, which I'm sure I pronounced wrong, we experience a great initial metric fakeout at the start, as your ear will likely acclimate to the short hits as the downbeats. When the guitar enters with the main repeated riff between G and A half flat, however, the downbeat is revealed to be in a different spot, and definitely in 5/4, a double shock to the uninitiated. Mata also plays with varying phrase lengths over 5/8, 5/4, and 5/2 scales, while the main beats occur. Fabiank uses a similar metric displacement at the beginning in 7/8 with 7/4 polymetric elements. Yorzarad uses a 7/8 and 7/4 feel both at once, layering that against groups of 3 eighth notes arpeggiated, and then uses those groups of 3 against groups of 4 in the drum section, featuring huge crash hits. Sahardnier plays with 3-on-2 action by eliding when it feels like groups of 2 beats divided into 3 versus groups of 3 beats divided into 2, or compound versus simple. For contrast, I don't really hear much in Microtonal Banana that's rhythmically surprising, or even too many different tempi. Everything's in 4/4 and not very syncopated, with the exception of the cool offbeat hits in the Nuclear Fusion intro, and the title track not being in 4/4 but in 7/8. It seems like a lot of the sections drag on due to lack of variation. Even if I get tired of hearing the same thing over and over, I must give them credit. Their songs may get stuck in my head, just like ADP's, as repetition legitimizes. It's hilariously invasive. You listen through Microtonal Banana and all the songs get lodged in there all at once as some sort of nebulous soup. Not only are Microtonal Banana's individual songs aggressively self-similar, but the songs across the album also seem very derived from each other. Many of them use the same Husseini mode, F-sharp, G-half-sharp, A, B, C-sharp, D-half-sharp, E, and F-sharp. And one of the reasons it's so obvious is because the songs seem to stay very much in that lane, except for Open Water, which makes its tonic G instead, which is quite the breath of fresh air modally. Actually, I think the songs all sounding too similar means that I can think of many of them in succession with an F sharp droning on in the bass, and it sounds right around this tempo, like do 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 do. So, you know, Rattlesnake and Sleep Drifter. Oh, Nuclear Fusion and Doom City 2. Hey there, which song is this? Did you say Doom City? Just kidding, you're wrong, it's Rattlesnake. Wait, sorry, it's both. See, it feels less inspired to me than it could, as if a very small bit of material is stretched out over a whole album. I don't mean to be unnecessarily critical, and understand Microtonal Banana is just one pit stop in a huge discography of Gizz's output. This is, after all, simply a subjective exploration into what makes two microtonal rock groups different from one another. Ultimately, even though there's lots of albums I'd rather listen to than Banana, the fact that it got people talking about microtonality at all is still net positive, so good for them. And it seemed to accomplish a lot fusion-wise and Anatolian rock-wise in ways I'm not as prepared to speak about. We just need way more types of music out there that don't use 12-tone equal temperament, and for that reason among many, I'm really glad Microtonal Banana exists. Personally, I think King Gizzard's more interesting microtonal songs aren't even on Microtonal Banana. YouTube channel The Pop Descriptivist does an excellent job indicating these handful of other songs and explaining the much higher varieties of hybrid scales used within the non-Banana repertoire, and I recommend you check their video out for the King Gizzard microtonal scale deep dive. Here now, in 2026, the conversation around ADP is something else entirely, the likes of which I haven't seen in years, and never expected to see in whatever attempt at a post-truth media landscape this is. ADP's genre list goes against what the music industry would like to be popular, but because it grooves so hard, that doesn't matter. Every adjective they wield, microtonal, math rock, alien, Dadaist, is a generally neglected valid genre branch that deserves to be stanned relentlessly in order to combat forced stagnation. It's getting people into Buckethead and Primus and King Crimson! How fantastic is ADP's virality, a rare, almost unheard of genuine win over the myopic blandness of today's sellouts and hustlers. It's something that many people are talking about, yet isn't tailor-made for capitalism. And yes, I know that it's a surface-level win, as the costumes contribute heavily to their claim to fame. But every win in mainstream culture nowadays is surface level, so I say, let's take what we can get. It's generally not about the music, or the important part, or the good part in these kinds of battles. Despite the genre list, ADP's music seems quite normal in a formal sense, repeating the same riff throughout a song. That's part of the appeal, the discrepancy between an assumption of the avant-garde and the band's true sound, as it calls the differences between stylistic and formal genres into question. I asked someone smart to review this script, and they had a quibble with the idea that ADP's or Gizz's scale of repetition is that different from other songs in popular genres like your average rock song. The reviewer's observation was wise, and reflecting on it a little more, I think that just attributing the feeling of repetitiveness to the level of a phrase or so, or how much it repeats, doesn't tell the full story of why things can feel so caught in place in Gizz and ADP's music, thus the similarity. Some bigger parts of that impression are as follows. Keeping the repeated phrase the same over the course of the entire song form, lack of harmony or harmonic changes, lack of orchestration, lack of variation, and even lack of lyrics. But honestly, I think the biggest factor here is the nature of the riffs themselves. When a lot of the riffs mostly center around one note, with most of the movement being a step or a few steps away, that can get a little stale sounding. ADP or Gizz's music is actually not all that different on a formal level than lots of rock, and that's not what I'm trying to make a case for. You can find innumerable examples of songs which repeat their progression over and over again the entire time at various scales from 32 bars down to a single beat or so. Their music does have relatively fixed form comparatively, though, instead of contrasting form, the latter often providing excitement, such as a bridge section providing a third exciting section to offset the back and forth of a verse and chorus section. A lot more credit should generally go to song form construction in general, I think, as clever juxtaposition keeps things moving. Personally, I'm biased towards the enjoyment of perceiving complex objects as they are often alive, variety-filled, human, and vibrant. Now, ADP using rhythmic reframing to provide variation in their music is particularly unique because, given their small toolkit, it's one of the few richer sources of variation available to them. I'm unaware of another group who splits up live loops of subdivided beats into different time signatures like ADP, but I'm sure that's due to my own ignorance. Please suggest groups who do this in the comments. This rhythmic reframing of ADP's is an economic, idiomatic, strikingly atypical decision, a classic example of what someone means when saying limitations foster creativity. And that just seems more distinctive than droning on F-sharp while happening to have a Middle Eastern scale played up top. In retrospect, it makes backward sense that the microtonal weirdness of ADP is part of the package instead of a covert element. The common narrative of microtonalists is that interesting tuning will have to be snuck through in order to placate the public. But ADP proves that might not be true. Everything about ADP seems out there in a theatrical way. I'm not really here to argue whether the costumes are a gimmick or not, but from a musical perspective, they energize me because the music would not only be hard to play without the mask, but they nail it with the mask as a live element. Now that's legitimately fun to engage with. They are ridiculously tight and a way that keeps me hooked. It's kind of like experiencing a low percent playthrough of a video game for the sheer challenge and satisfaction, such as beating Pikmin with only 50 Pikmin and no deaths. It adds a new exciting element to the situation. You'll find no shortage of material obsessing over their setup. The details of the costuming, looping, and new challenges associated with that make it feel like a unified production to me, but one where the plan serves the music instead of everything around the music. The short way to put it would be that gimmicks don't normally have a direct impact on the music this much. But the costumes' obstructions affect the kind of music they create, as it is now amenable to looping. Thus, the music is more impressive when you realize this, and I don't think it's quite as enthralling if you're unaware of the visual and practical elements. And that's fine. ADP's loops and cyclic scale is something one can be willing to look past because of this. As mentioned before, many of the riffs do rely a lot on one note moving back and forth by a neutral or major second. Sherpa, Mate Zyklek, Yorzarad, Toghad, Ababa Hotel. But the way ADP develops the music over time sells it, so you don't get the full appeal with a short clip. Yet at the same time, the fact that it repeats verbatim means people can put covers that are 15 seconds online and they feel like a relatively complete reference, perfect for short-form content. In this sense, ADP has an incredibly singular aesthetic, but it's not one that's done to death due to their microtonal approach and rhythmic recontextualizations, so that makes it really worthwhile. Their commitment to one underused aesthetic lane really reminds me of Ahmed, the jazz four-piece group that slowly variates a phrase length or so over time using free jazz aesthetics instead of subchromatic rock, and no looping. Of course, if you use stylistic genre to evaluate things and not formal ones, you may find Ahmed wildly different from ADP. To my knowledge, Ahmed's microtonality lies entirely within the saxophone part. Both Ahmed and ADP also have kind of a minimalistic element about them where you have to listen to something over time to hear how it really changes in a satisfying way, and that's another reason why they both reminded me of each other. Let's talk about that word subchromatic for a second, because it describes ADP's microtonality quite well. Oop, forgot to turn the page. Let's actually turn the page then. Okay. Are these the last ones? Yeah, great. Okay, here we go. While King Gizzard picked a common Middle Eastern scale for the sound of Microtonal Banana, it's harder to describe ADP's approach as being truly rooted in collections of scales. In fact, I think a lot of their music might even be deliberately constructed to avoid them. Here's what that means. It means that if you find all the notes ADP is using in a particular riff and octave reduce them into a scale construct, you will very often either get a small set of 24 tone equal temper notes all in a row next to each other, and then not enough other notes to fill out a scale saturating the octave, or a larger group of notes than normally comprises a base 7 note or so group because they're using many different inflections. In other words, it goes against the traditional definition of a scale as something that saturates the octave and has roughly 7 categorical pitches. Mate Zyklek is a great example, as the opening riff uses F, G, G half sharp, A flat, and A half flat all in a row, mostly to bridge G and A half flat. Later, the melodic riff starting on B, that one, starts on B, the major third. It introduces a whole host of chromatic variations on particular scale degrees. You could say the main scale uses G, A half flat, B, C, D, E half flat, and F, with subchromatic movement from B to C, and from B flat to B in a similar way. Sarniez is the quintessential subchromatic riff. It fundamentally doesn't work if you try to play semitones instead, and is really catchy. It might be one of the few times that a melodic riff has been stuck in the head of the general public using such subchromatic steps. Subchromatic steps are microtonal steps passing as being significantly less than the standard 100-cent piano semitone of 12th music. King Gizzard doesn't use subchromatic movement very often in Banana, and if they do, I don't believe they use it going from one quarter tone to the next in succession with the melody. The only exception I'm aware of is the nuclear fusion bass line, which does engage in this briefly. I think the subchromatic playing that ADP is engaging with here is also exciting because it may result in more than 7 categorically sounding notes per octave. When the Mate Zyklek riff develops, check out this variation, so many different shades. If you total up bars 81 to 84 in my transcription here, there are 14 distinct pitches being played. G, G half sharp, A flat, B flat, B half flat, B half sharp, C, D, E half flat, E, and F. You could analyze certain degrees as being more constant while the others function as variations, such as the G, C, D, and F. This subchromatic playing in ADP, combined with their whole vibe, also makes their microtonality an unavoidably noticeable element in their style, which also isn't as true of King Gizz. I think it would be possible to listen to Microtonal Banana and not notice a lot of the microtonal inflections, but you can't get rid of the quarter tone movements in ADP riffs and have them sound accurate. Imagine Sarnias without them. It's great that they have put the microtonal elements into their image so that people understand how essential it is to their sound. The reason this is so important is that whenever microtonal sounds are presented to 12th and culturated listeners as a whole, they, unjustly, do everything they can to ignore it, act like its effects aren't beneficial, or fixate on the parts that are easy to reject on the first listen. Unfortunately, if your microtonal music uses a 7-note scale, where 1 or 2 degrees are altered but not much else, that's ignorable. In other words, ADP riffs sound way less true to the original if you censor out the microtonality or choose to 12th wash it. There's another extremely cool feature that's part of ADP's subchromatic playing, and that's subchromatic sliding. The quintessential example, again, is found in Sarnias, which has that opening 5-note riff with a slide at the end. Since the last note secretly does a little slide up 1 fret, the small movement caused by the slide can very easily register as a bend. See, that's what Melodyne thinks. In fact, in some mediums, 4 notes actually have to work out because of the articulation possibilities of the instrument. Like this cover for Glasses here. It wouldn't sound right if you hit a 5th glass to get a 5th note, would it? After retranscribing Sarnias, I knew to watch out more for this subchromatic sliding business, so when checking out Mata Zyklek, I had my eye squarely on the fretboard to see if there was any funny business. And sure enough, check out this section where we hang out on the dominant. Did you catch the sliding on this held note here? I get the distinct feeling this is all over ADP's music, in ways that I haven't discovered or heard yet. But I have noticed some of that sliding element in various other songs. I think Tom Ebbs and Baba Hotel, I've heard it there. And no, I'm not going to transcribe their entire discography. This one really is for other people. You can do it! I hope you enjoyed these observations. It's odd that no one I know seemed to mention this particular articulation-based microtonal habit of ADP's, the subchromatic sliding, but hopefully this inspires you microtonally. I listen to a lot of microtonal music, and this seems to be a rare quality in that area. There's definitely abundant subchromatic movement in various genres, but it's rarely the basis for an entire repeated riff, rarely this unashamed to stick to the range of only around a major second, and rarely this disguised ornamentally. That combination gives ADP's subchromatic ideas a certain sound even without the sliding, which contextually can make things hypnotic or mesmerizing. The slid notes sometimes have the vibe of being snuck through under the radar, as it were, imitating a bend or vibrato in quarter tones. If you have other examples of that, I'd love to hear them. I'm sure they exist and I've heard some before, it's just that ADP makes it such a part of their style that I now associate it with them. By the way, to King Gizz's credit, they use fleeting microtonal harmony in some of their music, which ADP seems to work very hard not to do. That is, ADP doesn't line up vertical sounding harmony at the same time, unique to 24-tone equal temperament that I'm aware of, though some of the clustering in Utsp or Sarnias might get at this incidentally. I did hear parallel thirds in the harmony of Gizz's song Billabong Valley, including neutral thirds, so that's already more harmonically daring than ADP in passing. Also, if you want to hear microtonal looping with rigorous song structures and Zen harmonic feelings, check out the Mercury Tree! You've simply got to! Their microtonal albums, Self-Similar and Spidermilk, are to die for. And Ben invented a free online microtonal guitar tab software called Zentar that you can use to play ADP songs in your browser. That's right! You can go to zentar.net and play these songs and send your edits to others in collaborative projects. So really the moral of the story is that, as an avid listener of microtonal music, I find ADP's subchromatic sliding and their rhythmic reframings more unique than King Gizzard's Microtonal Banana, and ADP's style keeps the act of playing the same riff over and over impressively fresh enough, especially given their low-percent costume setup. However, the Mercury Tree is even cooler, and they've even looped microtonal music while wearing masks. Wild, I know. And the Mercury Tree has got, like, great harmonic changes and stuff. So go listen to the Mercury Tree.